My name is Patrick. I'll be facilitating this workshop today. Let's get started. So here's kind of the agenda of what we're going to be talking about today. I'm going to do an overview of Compass and all of the extensions that we have available to extend Compass to customize to your use cases. Next, we're going to do a three-part workshop. The first part is going to be focused on the UI and Forge storage. The second part is going to be exploring Compass's data provider module, which allows you to easily set up event and metric sources. And the last section is going to be all about Forge webhooks and the Compass SDK and sort of putting our project together. We're going to be using Compass to develop the app, and you'll need a Compass instance to be able to do this. We're also asking that you install Statuspage onto your site. It's going to be the tool that we're going to be integrating with this workshop, so you'll be needing that as well. We're also asked that you've already created a Forge app. This is just going to ensure that you have all the necessary tools that you need during Forge app development. This includes the Forge CLI, Docker, and an IDE of your choice that supports JavaScript. If you're not sure which one to download, I'm going to be using VS Code, and I'd recommend that as well. We also ask that you have Git. We're going to be cloning a repo and checking out code during this workshop. So you'll be needing that in order to get all of the hands-on portion. What is Compass? Hopefully, if you're joining this workshop, you have some familiarity with Compass and the problems that it solves. But I'm just going to give a quick refresher of the main concepts and the main screens that you might see around Compass. So Compass is really a developer experience platform, and it gives you three main things. It gives you the catalog, it gives you a way to monitor and enforce DevOps health, and it has a ton of extensibility. The catalog really is to keep track of your technical architecture and all the teams that collaborate around it. These are things like the microservices that your teams create, the libraries, the APIs they maintain, that sort of stuff. The DevOps health is really allowing you to apply those engineering best practices at scale to keep your architecture reliant, performant, and secure. And it does these things through tracking metrics related to your services in the catalog, and also through scorecards to enforce those metrics, and through checkoffs, which allows you to set up a ritual around reflecting on your services operations. And extensibility, this is why you're all here today, hopefully. It really allows you to connect information from across your toolchain into Compass. We really pride ourselves on having a very extensible experience and an open API to allow this sort of thing. So now let's go through some of the screens that you might see on Compass. So this is a screenshot from the component catalog. And as you can see, there are several different parts. We have the title up here, description of the service, any labels, any scorecards associated with the service. We'll take a look at scorecards and metrics more in just a second. And then on the right-hand side, we have a section with a ton of different link options. Links can have several different types, such as repositories, projects, on-call links, dashboards. There's a ton of different options there. So metrics are going to be really important to getting value out of your Compass experience. And metrics can be set up to kind of be whatever you want. Apps can install metrics as well, as you can see in the screenshot here. Let's see if I can get my mouse over there. Oops. We have PR cycle time, for instance, of 31 minutes. And when you click on the metric, you can see the history of that as well. So you can also set up scorecards for your Compass component. Scorecards can be based on metrics or can be based on the presence of other fields as well. This really allows you to set up some enforcement of people filling out their components in Compass. And we also have a section on dependencies and a dependency map. This is really cool. Developers really love this. You are able to track what services, APIs, and stuff your component depends on. And you can also see what depends on your services. This allows you to do things like announce changes to all of your dependent services and stuff like that. And we also have the activity feed. So this is going to display all events that are happening related to your component. Most of these are going to be coming from third-party tools. So to get them, you either need to send them in yourself using something like curl and our REST API, or you need to have an app installed that can ingest them. This is kind of what we're going to be looking at building today. But you can see here in this screenshot, we have a GitHub app ingesting some deployments. And we can also see some deployments on one of the services that we depend on. This view is really useful during incidents to kind of see what's changed recently, or to look at your upstream dependencies and see what they might have changed. And of course, extensibility is really all about making Compass yours. We have a ton of apps already available. You can see here in the screenshot, we got Bitbucket, CircleCI, GitHub, GitLab, LaunchDarkly. There's a ton of different apps there. You can check out the full list by clicking that apps tab at the top in your Compass instance. And the image on the right here is taken from Atlassian's internal instance of Compass, where we have tons of extensions to really help Compass suit Atlassian's needs. All right, so that was kind of an overview of Compass and what Compass offers. And now I'm going to go over the modules that we have available for developers right now to extend Compass. We have the component page, admin page, global page, team page, and data provider. So I'll be going through them one by one and kind of showing what those look like in the UI. So here we have an example app, which you can install right now. It's called Swagger UI. And what it does is it shows the API spec for a component. So how this works is when the app is installed, the app has a module that tells it that it would like to display on the component page. So once that happens, it shows up here. Get my cursor over there again. It shows here in this left-hand section, and it has the title of the app. And then once you click on it, you get this full page experience where the app can kind of show whatever it wants. So I've highlighted here in the blue box what the actual bounds of what the app can show is. So it's a pretty big box. You can show whatever UI you want using your Forge app here. Next up, we have the admin page. Most apps are going to have an admin page module, as this is generally where all the authentication is going to occur for your app. So to get to this extension point, you go to the Apps tab, install an app, and then when you click Configure, it brings you to that extension point. So this extension point is protected such that only Compass admins are able to view it. This means that once you add authentication here and save it, normal users can't go in and accidentally disconnect it, for instance. And we're going to be using one of these modules in today's workshop. Next up, we have the global page. When you have an app with the global page module installed, a little caret appears next to that app tab or the app's navigation button in the top. Clicking on the caret shows a drop down of all of the global page apps, and clicking on it takes you to, as you can see, a very much full page takeover for that app to display any UI you want. On our internal instance of Compass, for example, at Atlassian, we have a global page that allows you to create new microservices. And lastly, for the UI extensions, we have the team page. Teams are a central concept in Compass. You can have your team and go there and manage it. It's also where the checkops feature is, which I didn't go over, but it allows you to check in weekly on your team's health and how your services are doing. You can also add the team page extension here. It's reminiscent kind of the component page in that something will show up in this left nav, and then you have a big UI section on there. All right, but not all modules are extension points visible in the UI. We have one more module, which we'll be using today in the workshop, that's not UI based. And what it does is it handles the setting up of event and metric sources and backfilling links when they're added to a component. So in order to power that thing like we saw with PR cycle time and stuff from one of your source control management apps, it needs to set up what's called event sources and metric sources in Compass. And this module is going to help you do that. We're also going to be using this today in the workshop. All right, so that was probably a whirlwind tour, pretty fast, but let's dive right into it. I think everything's going to make more sense when we can get hands-on. So the goal of this workshop is going to be making an app that integrates with Statuspage to ingest incident events to Compass components. So let's kind of break it down. I'm going to change my share to make a new share here. Just give me one moment while I set that up. New share. So I'm going to demo what a functioning app is going to look like here. So let me share this. So Statuspage kind of looks like this. So while it is an Atlassian product, we're going to be treating it kind of as a third-party tool that we're going to integrate with. So the concepts that you learn today about like calling its APIs and stuff, this is going to be translatable to calling APIs of any other tool. Nothing is going to be first-party Atlassian specific, so you don't need to worry about that. The thing that we're going to want to ingest from Statuspage are these incidents. So Statuspage allows you to create an incident and it allows you to send notifications about those incidents. So what we want to do is when a connected Statuspage does this, we want to ingest this incident event onto our Compass component and show it in that little activity timeline. So this is Compass. This is a dev site that I set up. It doesn't really have any information in it right now, but if we navigate to this apps tab here, this is going to kind of be the central apps location that we're going to be working with today. So as you can see, we have Bitbucket, GitLab, all these awesome apps that you can install, try out on another day. We're just going to be focused on the app that we're developing during our workshop today. So I've already installed a functional version of the app onto my site here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click configure, which will bring me to the admin page. And looks like my UI might be a little out of date. Hopefully I deployed the final version rather than the initial version, but let's check it out. So I'm going to need to install, enter the API token, and enter the page. All right, looks like I am now connected. Awesome. So now when I create a Compass component here, and I add a link to the incident section of the status page. and then refresh this. You can see metrics are already starting to be set up. I have a test definition coming in, and I have a recent incidents metric here. If I then create an incident on the status page, and the impact right now is none, and I go back here and take a look at my component, we can see that this incident shows up here in Compass. This is really cool because you can have this screen here, which is really the centralized view for everything happening with your component. So that's kind of the goal of the workshop there. Let me reshare the slide deck. So while this app is not going to be hugely useful to you, in particular, the concepts you're going to learn about displaying UI, storing authentication, using the data provider module, and utilizing webhooks are all going to be really useful for any app that you build on the future with your Compass instance. So this is the goal output of the workshop, but please stay curious, play around with things you find during the course of the workshop, and think of how you could use the patterns we're going to explore to get data into your Compass about your own systems as well. All right, so like I said earlier, this workshop is going to have 3 parts. There's going to be 10 exercises in total with 4 optional extensions. While most people might be beginners to using Forge and Compass's capabilities, you might be very familiar and need an extra challenge. So we have optional extensions there available to you to explore as well. If you ever get lost, there's going to be a README in the repo that we're working with. Please check the README for instructions. All right, so let's get started. So once you've cloned the repo, you can change directory into it. And next, we're going to install the dependencies using Yarn or NPM. I use Yarn, and we recommend using it. I understand that the Getting Started Forge guide used NPM, so if you want to do that, you can. I'd recommend using this command right now to install Yarn if you don't have it already. And then you're going to use it to install the dependencies. And once you've run Yarn in the top level, you'll run Yarn UI install. So what this is doing is this is installing all of the packages in the UI folder of our project. The UI folder is going to be using custom UI, so it is built separately than the rest of the app. If you've used UIKit before, which is another Forge offering for a UI solution, that does not need to do these steps with being built separately and having separate packages to manage it. But we'll be using custom UI in this workshop. On Compass, we tend to use custom UI since it allows much greater flexibility of the components that you want to show and also formatting. I know the Forge team is actively developing UIKit and UIKit 2, which is kind of the next iteration of it. But for now, we'll be developing using custom UI. All right, and then after you do that second install, you can run Yarn UI build. All right, so I'm going to continue walking through the next steps, but again, in the README file in the repo, scroll to the top, it walks through all the commands that I'm going to run on this slide here. So if Yarn is taking a while to install or any of these steps take a while, all the commands are going to be available for you. I'm going to continue walking along, and you can keep following along as well. Next, you're going to want to register and deploy your app. So log into Forge if you haven't already done so in the requisite section. So that's Forge login. Here's my email. And I'm going to do this not on the screen that I'm sharing with you all. And you should see a login message success like this. So next, we're going to register our app, which is going to create a new app ID just for you. So we're going to run Forge register. And then you can enter a name for your app. It doesn't really matter what your app is called. Nothing is based off of it. It'll just show up in the UI. So I'm going to call it Dev Day Workshop. All right, next, we're going to want to deploy the app. So we'll say Forge deploy. So we'll run Forge install. And then you're going to use your arrow keys in this little fun CLI thing to select Compass. And then you're going to enter your site. And you're going to want to include the Atlassian.net part of it. So let me go to my site here. And I'll select that. Yep. And when you do the installation, you just want to say yes to these permissions. When your install is complete, you can go check it out in Compass. So go to Compass in the browser, go to the Apps tab, and if you scroll down, you should see your app and the name that you put there, and you should be able to click Configure to go into that app screen. Let's check it out on the browser. All right, so I can see my app here. It's called Dev Day Workshop. Again, yours is going to have a different name based on what you called it. Clicking Configure brings us to this admin page that we talked about earlier. So everything in here is going to be controlled by the app. And when any user first visits one of these extension points, you're going to see this little pop-up here. It's talking about allowing the app to access Atlassian products on your behalf. So Forge has two ways to interact with the API. It can interact with the API as an app where the records are logged as the app taking actions, and it can also invoke the API as a user. So accepting this is essentially allowing the app to act on your behalf. You can see all of the scopes that it has. So in this case, the app is pretty simple. It just has read Compass components and views some profile details about the logged in user. And you can also see that I've already added some of the extensions there. After accepting that, you should see this landing page. It has a note for exercise 1.1, and it has these two input fields. So I'm going to do a walkthrough real quick of the Forge app structure that we have set up. So you can open your IDE and follow along. or you can kind of just watch me walk through it. So the focal point of your Forge app is going to be this manifest file that we've been looking at. So this is going to define all of the modules that your app uses. Right now, we just have the admin page, and we have other stuff here commented out for later in the exercise. It also has your app ID here. This is going to be specific to you and your app. And every time you make a new app, it's going to have a new app ID. It also is going to be the location where all of your permissions are. So these are the things that your app requests permission for. It's showed to the users when installing the app and when users visit the app for the first time in the UI as well. So right now we just have read component Compass set up, but you can follow this link here to check out all of the permissions available. Another important part is the package.json file. If you haven't used Node before, this is kind of the location where you manage all of the dependencies related to your project. In this source folder here is going to be where most of the backend processing and logic and stuff is going to be at. So we have a clients folder, which is going to contain a client for interacting with the Statuspage API. We're going to have an entry folder, which is going to have the data provider module, which we'll chat about later, and also web triggers, which is going to be in part 3 as well. We have services for any processing we need to do, and we have resolvers for any processing being done by the front end. So now let's take a glance at the front end. The front end is located in the UI folder here. So you can see here that it also has its own package.json file to manage its dependencies. You can really think of the UI as a sub project within this. When you want to make changes to the UI, you're going to need to build it or run it separately. In the only file you really need to keep track of here is the app.tsx file. If we take a look here at this, you can see that we see that text we saw in the UI of exercise 1.1 replace me, and then also a bunch of components for those fields that we saw below. So we're going to be taking a look at this really shortly. This is going to be our first exercise. We're going to be making UI changes first, and there's going to be 2 options here for what you can do to see these changes in the UI. Option 1 is going to be rebuilding and redeploying a lot. So the commands that we've already seen for this are yarn UI build and forge deploy. So every time you make a UI change, you're going to want to rebuild and then redeploy it. It can be a little slow to do this, and you have to remember to build. So option 2 is doing a hot reload kind of situation. So it uses the forge tunnel command, which runs all of the forge stuff with hot reloading. And then in a separate terminal, you're going to want to run yarn UI start. So this starts up the UI and allows reloading there. For simplicity during this workshop, I'm probably just going to use yarn UI build and forge deploy. Also, if you're on a M1 MacBook, I'm not sure how many of you are, but there's also been some recent performance concerns with the Forge tunnel just taking a while to reload changes. So it might honestly be faster to just use UI build and Forge deploy. But both are options that should work. So part 1 is going to take around 20 minutes. So we're going to be doing UI modifications and working with Forge storage. So it's going to have 3 exercises that we're going to ask you to complete. And at the end, if you rush through the 3 exercises. Let's say you've worked with Forge before. There's going to be 3 extensions to really explore different aspects of the UI and this admin page. Those are going to be optional. We're just going to need to complete 3 exercises as part of the workshop. And I forgot to show this during the little repo tour, but we have a folder up here called Dev Day Exercise Solutions. So these are going to contain all the solutions to each exercise. Each exercise is only going to change 1 or 2 files. They're going to be pretty small and pretty targeted. For instance, exercise 1 is going to ask you to change this app file here and to change the package.json file in the UI. And if you look under part 1, exercise 1, you'll see we have a version of the app file and a version of the package.json file that'll contain the code that you can use as reference if you get stuck, or if you're behind and want to catch up, you can also copy paste that. I encourage you to try out these exercises on your own first without looking at the solution, as you will definitely learn the most that way. I'm also going to be going over the solutions after each exercise, so you can also learn about the solutions that way. Let's get started. So exercise 1.1, the goal is to modify the UI by adding a section message to this admin page. So it's going to be this little me section here and adding a section message component there. At the end, it should look kind of like this. This is what a section message looks like. It is going to have an information blue bubble to it, and it'll contain instructions on how to generate the API key and how to find the page ID. So that's kind of what we're working for right now. And there's an exercise 1 to do in the UI source app.tsx file. So go to this file now, make some changes. You're also going to need to add a new package to the dependencies. I would then run the build command and then the deploy command and see your changes in the UI. So I'm going to go over my solution, and if you don't have a solution yet, I advise copy pasting from that solutions file that we talked about. The solution is to use the section message from Atlas Kit that was linked in that file right there. What you have to do is you need to go into the package.json file and add the section message as a dependency. Again, if you need help or need a reference, you can look in these solutions files here. And then in the app.tsx file, I added a section message with the appearance flag of information. And then I entered the message from here on how to generate the API key in little paragraph tags. It is showing up in the UI after I ran the commands UI build and Forge deploy. All right, now let's go on to the next exercise, but we're going to want to add permissions for the storage and update the app. One of the issues earlier that we saw in the workshop that you might have seen in your terminal is Forge is pretty good about enforcing permissions and telling you if you're violating them ahead of time. So one thing we need to add here is go to the manifest file. So by uncommenting this is essentially saying, hey, our app is going to use the storage API, and users need to consent to this. So I add this in here, save the file, and I must redeploy and upgrade the installation. So anytime you change your manifest file to add new scopes, users need to be aware of this. So they must go through an upgrade of their installation. Since you're the site owner, you can just run this forge install upgrade command and accept the new permissions. So we'll start out with a forge deploy. All right, and you can see here that the CLI has also detected that there's new scopes and has reminded me to run this command. But we'll then say forge install -- upgrade. This is then going to list the sites that your app is installed on. And you can see here that the version is now out of date. So hit enter to select the site and then say Y for yes. And it'll upgrade. So to double check that it's installed, you can say forge install list. And you can see here the version is now latest rather than out of date. Whenever you upgrade the permissions in your app, individual users will also need to reconsent and accept. All right, cool. So now our app is installed and ready to go with permissions to use the storage API. So let's do that. We have these really tempting fields here for page ID and API token, and we want to save these. So we're going to add calls to the storage API to save this information. So find the exercise 1.3 to-dos. There's 3 to-do locations in the source resolvers file. If we go take a look at that. So no longer in the UI folder. In here, there we go. We're going to want to add calls to the Forge storage API in here. There's 3 locations in the is page connected function, the disconnect page, and the validate and connect page. So you can check out the storage API here. I'm going to open it up alongside you, and you can see, oops, this is going to be how you import the package in your app. And then you can see the different functions that we have. So the ones that we're going to want to use today are storage set for the page ID, storage set secret for the API key, storage get for retrieving it, and delete for disconnecting it. So get started writing out those functions and getting familiar with the storage API. So once you have code in these resolvers, since this is not UI, you can just run Forge deploy without running that UI build first. If you've implemented it correctly and return success from that validate function, the UI should change to show a configured state. All right, so we've deployed. So what I'm going to do here. I'm going to go get that API info. So again, if you're on your status page, and if you're confused how to get to your status page, you can use the app switcher. So it's this little box in the top left, and then you'll click status page, and it should link you out to your status page. Once you're here, and you click the profile, API info, it should get you to this page. These instructions should be in the section message that you added, but it's always helpful to see it in practice. So let's close that. So I've copied over my API token and my page ID. And when I hit submit, it should show this woohoo, you are connected screen. All right, so hopefully you've been able to work on this exercise. We have 2 calls to the storage set after we added the import, one for setting the page ID, one for setting the secret. We also have delete, delete secret, get secret, and get. So for storage is really useful for storing these little pieces of information. For storage is generally not good if you want to store large amounts of information. It's not a great database per se, but it's great for storing small amounts of information there. All right, so after the workshop, if you ever want to keep exploring, we have some extensions set up to explore different UI components, explore other Compass extension points. And then if you really want to get involved in putting all the pieces together, we have an idea for how you could use the UI, explore the resolvers, and explore the status page API as well. So these extensions are not required. The information about them is in the README, which you can check out after the workshop. Status page incidents we looked at earlier. They're external incidents that we want to ingest into Compass as events. So these are the 2 views in Compass that we saw. This is the activity feed. It's going to show events that are happening on your component. And then we also have metrics. So the way that Compass allows you to ingest events and metrics is you need to first set up event and metric sources. So on this component, you can see here, you get deployments from 2 apps and flags from another app. This means that they've all set up event sources to be able to ingest these kinds of events. Additionally, you can see here for metrics, we have these all set up here. So this is an important API concept. We noticed that it was a bit confusing for developers, so we built this module to help you set these up. So let's take a look at a sample app in the browser together real quick. I'm gonna pop open the SpeakerNet so I can grab the link to that. And I'm going to walk through how it works. So this documentation stuff is going to be available to you after the workshop as well. So this is an example app, and it kind of has the same structure that is in the app that we're working on. So in the source folder, under entry, under data provider, this is where the contents of the data provider module are located. And I'm going to kind of go over what each part is and what it does. So essentially, this is a function that is triggered when a link is added to your Compass component. So when in my example, when I added a link to this other links section, the data provider module of my app was invoked because of how it was set up. So I'm so sorry I'm bouncing around a little bit, but I think it's important to look at the manifest file first. So exercise 2.1, which we can kind of get started on now, is just uncommenting this module here. This is going to include the module within our app and set us up to start invoking our data provider function when a link of a certain type is added. The link types are here. In this case, we're just listening to other link types, but this is a list and you can add other things like repository. All right, and the domain is also a regular expression on what kind of domains you want to listen to. In this case, we only care about statuspage.io links, so we put this domain in here. So when your data provider function is activated, the request is going to come through and it's going to have the URL associated with the link that was added to that component. What you can then do is you can start setting up your data provider response. The first parameter to it is a unique ID associated with that external source. In this case, it's parsing out whatever's behind example data provider app. But this external ID is important as it's what's used to associate incoming events with any event sources that you've set up. So in our app, we'll be using page ID as the external source ID. This event types here is going to be what type of events your app wants to send into Compass. In this example, you can see here, it's going to ingest deployments. Next, we have any built-in metric definitions that you want to add. So built-in metric definitions are basically predefined metrics that we think many Compass users are going to be using. As you can see here, we have weekly deployment frequency, 28 days. The really cool thing about predefined metrics is some of them are calculated automatically based on events, and we call these things derived metrics. So things like weekly deployment frequency can be set to derived, and this will calculate based on the deployment events that are coming in. Not all metrics can be derived, and so many metrics will be set to derived false. You can also add custom metric definitions, which is basically anything you want. They're inherently not derived since normally we run the calculations for the derived metrics. You don't need to worry about them. So you would need to push in the metric values for that. Then typically apps will do any calculation of initial metrics or retrieving previous events that they want to backfill. And then you return the response, adding any events that you want to backfill, any metric values, and stuff like that. So that's kind of how the data provider module works. It's a pretty powerful module. I don't think we're going to have time, unfortunately, to test it out live during this workshop, but let's see, I'll just highlight the section in the README. Yeah, the next section is about setting up incident events using this data provider module. So you can follow through the exercises for that, referring to the solutions. All right, it looks like I am running out of time. So what I do is, if you have a moment to stay on, I'm going to skip ahead through these extensions and then do a quick overview of Forge web triggers and our SDK, which would be the third section of the workshop. So Forge web triggers are the way of invoking your app. So again, everything comes back to the manifest. You can see here that we've defined one web trigger in our app, and this is going to be the way that Statuspage can communicate with our app when incident events come up. So what we can do is there's an API to get the web trigger URL of this incident web trigger, install that onto the Statuspage side, and then have it invoke it every time an incident comes up. This allows us to process that event and to create the event. As for creating the event, we have a SDK available for Compass developers on Forge that we've built that allows easy access to the API. So we're going to take a quick look at the docs in the browser. So let's see, developer. All right, so these are our developer docs and the GraphQL toolkit. This is the way to interact with our GraphQL API really easily through Forge. If you continue through the self-paced section of part 3, you'll see that you can do requests like this, where we're requesting Compass to get the component. And then you put this in your code and you'll get the component. So part 3 is going to be exploring the API here. And as you can see, there's a ton of Compass requests that you can use here. And then you can like add events and stuff like that through our SDK. Yeah, so there's a ton of resources that we have available to you during your Forge developer experience. They're all linked in the README. I would say the most important one is kind of this getting started integrating with Compass guide. It's kind of the hub, has a high level overview of important concepts for integrating with Compass, and the links at the bottom as well. I put a screenshot of it here, but we have a ton of resources available to you. Some highlights are the GitLab app for Compass is a open source real production Forge app that we run. So you can use that as a reference to see what a real like production scale Forge app is. It's a bit more complex than our sample one we've been working with, and then tons of other resources there. So thank you so much for attending this workshop. I really enjoyed putting it together, and I hope that you can use this guide to help you in your Forge developer experience journey.